Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. I won't necessarily read the bio that's in the programs of Nick, but I guess it's safe to say that Nick's had a fairly big impact on QASEL, has worked closely with QASEL over a number of years, and has probably worked closely with a number of people in this room through Growth Coaching International at some stage. And my first interaction with Nick was probably 6-7 years ago through some of the growth coaching stuff, and you know, Nick's been a great ambassador for coaching within schools, and has worked recently with the Principals Association QASEL in particular around mojo maintenance for principals. Rosen spoke earlier on around the funding that was assigned to the associations to support principal wellbeing, and can I say after attending one of those workshops, I got a lot out of that and put quite a bit of that into play. So I'd like to think my mojo is doing fairly well at the moment, Nick. So, but Nick's going to be talking about the myriad of leadership conversations. So I'm sure, and I can guarantee that there will be quite a bit to take out today. So please join me in welcoming Nick to the stage.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm not a great fan of using microphones, but I have a sense it's probably helpful considering the size of the room. And before I forget, if you want a copy of the presentation, I'm just going to send this round and I'll make sure you get a copy. If you don't, all good too. On the table also is the Myriad, and I'll unpack that in a minute. And it was interesting to reflect for me. So my first conference ever in Australia, nearly 14 years ago, it wasn't QASEL then, it was ACAQ. So I spoke at that one nearly 14 years ago, which is a bit scary, certainly is for me. As you can see, it's had a dramatic impact on my accent. It's totally Australian now, you can't tell I'm a Pomo at all, can you? Not at all. Certain phrases, certainly Australian now, but yeah, I think I'm stuck with this for life. So I'm just going to dive straight into it. I'm very happy. Again, it can be a bit challenging when there's a big group. If we want to ask questions, clarifications as we go along, please do, and I'll try and make sure we have an opportunity to ask questions. But also I'm here for the 3 days. I'm out in the stalls there and I'll be wandering around, happy to have conversations with folks around us. So, talking about mojo maintenance, we're going to have a check-in. So just at your table, I want you to talk about how inflated or not is your mojo right now. So, if you're down here at the purple end, all right, it's still okay, but hopefully think about things that can inflate your mojo. Great if you're aware the red balloon is. And we talk about in mojo maintenance and other things now, there's rules. So excuse my language occasionally, bullshit rules. We have to be happy. Nature of life and nature of being human is we have challenges that come along at times, so we're not always going to be super inflated. Sometimes we are going to be, unfortunately, down near where the purple is. So I want you to think about where's your mojo right now, and then what's been happening recently, it might be coming to the conference, it's been helping to inflate your mojo. So just a couple of minutes at your table, where's your mojo right now, what's been happening to help inflate your mojo?
Deflated your mojo, so you've got no, I'm not there. Or green. Maybe a yellow, yeah. But to get up to red, yeah, we have to work as a team to keep that working. I think that's really good. That rolling effect going, yeah.
So no matter, well, you've got the shift of the deputies, so they're already on board anyway for 3 weeks. Well, for 3 weeks, and you can't predict what's going to happen next term. No, that's what I've had staff totals all year. I'll just go to the point where, okay, you know, it's sort of like, really
Get mojo after that.
yeah, that's exactly
Yeah, that
right.
would be very difficult. We've had a couple of staff changes this year, so to keep
I've had one term. I've had one term in my little group, but we've also had lots of, it's just like a constant shift, and you just think, okay, I can either let that get to me, or I can just have, right, so this is the nature of the landscape here, what can I do?
that's how you're going to have to
Yeah, that's right, what can I do to support people who are still here, so that they don't start thinking, well,
Okay, folks, Good to remember, just talking with Andrew there, good to remember the good things that are happening. So we're hardwired as humans to remember the bad things more than the good things. So little things that can help us do our very best in what can be a challenging job at times, and particularly this stage of the term. I don't know if it is, but I reckon this stage of the term for many schools I'm interacting with is probably where mojo is often the lowest. We're heading into winter. I say that a bit, coming from England, but heading into winter. But also there's a lot of things on, and we've got, it's an 11-week term. Little things like that play on our minds. So this is about remembering the good things and that are happening throughout the schools. So a little bit of framework around why did I spend time in this. One of the things, as Andrew said, I spent the last 6 years really very much in the coaching space, and setting up my own business nearly a year ago now, which has flown by, was thinking about, okay, coaching is a really important piece, a very powerful piece as part of the whole that leaders can bring to their conversations, but there are more. There's more that we need to reflect on and think about, and I'll unpack this a little bit as we go through this session, that it's not just about, coaching isn't always the answer. All right, it's a great answer, but only when it's the right question. It's the right answer to the right question. So I'm briefly going to explore those bits. But I thought this was a useful one to reflect on and think about. And schools are run on conversations, aren't they? The quality of the conversation leads, I think, directly to the quality of the organisation. And that's not just down to one person, that is impossible. But the quality of their conversations, particularly the more senior leaders has a ripple effect. So the ripple effects of things. So if we have high quality conversations, more likely people we talk to will have high quality conversations. Can't guarantee these things. It's not about every conversation is going to be at that level. But the more we can do those things, the better. Is exploring it and thinking about for me. I came across this recently, even though you see it's been around for a while now, and this sort of really resonated with me. And also bits of work I'm doing with Pete Stebbins and Alistair Kerr at the high performance team space around right sizing. So what's the right approach at this particular moment? And I thought this was quite resonant. In the danger is, coaching, as I say, is a great answer, but delivered at the wrong time creates frustration and confusion for people. I'm trying to coach someone who doesn't want to be coached. They're going to get incredibly frustrated because I'm just going to ask them questions. I'm not going to give them ideas or thoughts of what they're going to do. I want thoughts and ideas of what they're going to do. The person's not giving them to me. And I have another reason was I didn't want to get to the stage in a year or two's time where people said, oh yeah, I remember coaching. We did it back in 2017, 2018. And those of you who have been in education a bit longer will know there's cycles to these things. But coaching is a great tool to add to your toolbox, but it's not the only tool around conversations. I'll try not to do this too quickly in case any of you get motion sickness. That's a slight risk of these. I'll spend more time on some of them. So, and in this, there's a cardboard piece, a diagram on your tables, and if they've run out, I haven't got one, I've got a spare here. And part of it was that time, I actually had time, and this is a great luxury compared to the busyness of schools, I had time to stop and think. When I finished up with Growth Coaching International, I actually took time and had time to think about the whole range of conversations. And I did, as I said, I had a slight concern that coaching was being seen as the answer to every conversation. Now this is, for experienced leaders or any inexperienced leaders, isn't rocket science. It's just a framework to understand the whole range of conversations that people are involved in on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and it's about identifying what sort of conversation am I involved in and what do I think is the best approach for me and for the person I'm having the conversation with. So one of my passions is to help people get the most out of every conversation they have. One thing that virtually everyone is doing is giving as much time as they possibly can give. So we can't work any harder in our daily work at school, but what we can do is, okay, how do we work a bit smarter? And again, it's a flippant phrase, isn't it? Work smarter, not harder. So again, hopefully this will give you a bit of an introduction as to how we might do that, to get the most out of every conversation we have. How do we generate the most impact and help people move forward in the most ways? And sometimes that will be in the one-on-one conversation, sometimes it'll be coaching. Great if it is, great space, very empowering for both people involved involved in those conversations, but sometimes, absolutely rightly so, it'll be mentoring. Okay, and I'll unpack what the difference is in my perspective around this, and sometimes it's absolutely about managing type conversations, and again, I'll unpack my understanding of what those mean. And that's where I'm going to spend most of the time today. There's a whole range of other things there when we're working with teams or groups, the types of conversations we might have with those teams and groups. And briefly touch on those. At times I wanted my leaders to be inspiring, to think, yeah, I want to follow them. I want to follow what their vision is, what their passion is. As Patria talked about this morning, that passion is part of our role, not all of our role as leaders, but part of our role. How do I bring people with me on this journey to improvement as part of this? Sometimes it's about co-creating. How do we work together to get even better outcomes? And sometimes very mundane, but it's about informing people. This is when reports are due in. This is when things are going to happen. And that's part of our role, individually, but also with teams as part of that. Stakeholders is a very similar space to that. And student conversations. And there's writing that sits behind this that I'm very happy to share, and it's emergent thinking. This isn't locked in, but the idea for me is, as I'm going into a conversation, reminders about what sort of a conversation is it, what sort of conversational position might I take up to get the most out of this interaction I'm about to have. And conversational intelligence, which I'll give you a bit of a taster around, hopefully is one way of helping us do that. So, a bit more time in this, and this is a very simplistic model into something that's very complex. But again, part of my thinking moving forward was, how do I make things as simple as possible? Just because you're so busy, how do I remember these things? It's easy for people who train in coaching, we spend all our time in coaching. But you're leaders, and in any one conversation you might be taking up all of those positions. It's about being deliberate in our practice rather than going to a default. Our natural default for most of us as teachers is to go to telling. Good friend of mine, a colleague, a principal of a primary school, calls teachers, he's one, I'm one, I still call myself, think of myself as a teacher, as ATMs, automatic telling machines. We're hardwired, and it comes out of a good space. We're designed to try and help people, all right, but that can get in the way. Again, if I want to be coached and someone's telling me what to do, that I find that resisting, I find that frustrating as well. So it's about working out what's the best approach for this person. The key bit here I talk about is the bottom bit. Depends on the context and the knowledge, skills and attitude of the person opposite me. High risk situation, person highly stressed in front of me, probably the worst time to try and coach. Because their front brain, their thinking brain isn't working at that precise moment. We're not feeling safe, or we're feeling highly stressed. We can't rationally think. So actually clear direction, being told what to do, tends to calm us down. Following that, great opportunity to coach or mentor. So the more experience, knowledge someone has, the more likely they are to benefit from coaching. The less experience, knowledge they have, the more likely they are to benefit from mentoring. Managing comes into all of our interactions at times as leaders. So managing for me, and again we can spend a whole chunk of time on this, is a range there from well-being type conversations, checking in with people as to how they're travelling, to performance conversations, and I absolutely mean the full range of performance conversations. Most of us, if you've been in leadership, even for a relatively short period of time, can think of the difficult conversations, or in CIQ, conversational intelligence, what they call uncomfortable conversations. But in my experience, the vast majority of staff we work with are doing at least okay, if not better, and want to improve. And I do throw a challenge out there, and I understand that there's people you can probably think of that don't display this, but as human beings, you know, we're actually hardwired to want to get a bit better. All right, it doesn't always play out that way, I absolutely get that, and I can think of people who didn't display that on occasions, but I do have a strong belief that no one gets up in the morning determined to be worse than they were yesterday. Sometimes that's the way it plays out for all of us. You know, we have good days and not so good days, but we're a bit hardwired to want to improve, unless people have serious, you know, psychological issues where they need additional help and support as part of that. The far end of managing is compliance. You're not doing what we need you to do, we need you to move forward. The uncomfortable conversations. The better we do all the other ones, I have a hope belief, the less likely we are to have those conversations. You know, again, sounds simple, but it's not easy, given there's so many interactions. But as I say, we're more hardwired to go into mentoring, telling type conversations. So it's how do I hold that conversational position, ask a few more questions and listen a bit more than I'm generally hardwired to do. As teachers, we're used to teaching. Okay, we should be mindful. There's 3 things that impact on human motivation that sort of keep resonating with me when I came across them by Dessay and Ryan. One was autonomy. The more choice I have, the more motivation I have to want to do it, to prove that I want to succeed in this, which links to the second one, which is around competency. None of us want to feel incompetent or be judged incompetent. That's not a nice feeling. And the final one, which is linked to all of these, is relationship, relatedness. What's my relationship with the person I'm having this conversation with? So, very brief whistle-stop tour of conversational intelligence, the myriad of conversations. As I say, very happy to explore that, explain that further to people outside of here. But I wanted to dive in to give you a bit of a taste. Some of you in the room have already had a taste of this, but this thing called conversational intelligence. A lady called Judith Glaser, not Glasser, Judith Glaser, Glaser, developed this framework and these tools in the States, and mainly in the corporate space. And I came across it nearly 2 years ago now, and then spent all of last year getting more knowledge and information around what it is. And it's not the answer, because there's no such thing in my view, but it is a helpful answer to how do we have all those different conversations a bit more effectively. What do I bring into this conversation? And it's based on the neuroscience. Every conversation we have releases chemicals. Good ones or not so good ones. All right? So those conversations where we feel great and we feel really positive chemicals are released in those conversations. Those that feel and aren't very helpful or don't feel great, negative chemicals or chemicals that too much of those aren't healthy or helpful to us. There's no such thing as always bad because they're there for a reason, but how do we get the most out of everyone we're working with? And they very much talk about we-centric leadership. So leadership with people or leadership over people. If we're power over, that's when we're told because we're the boss we have to do things. Times that's going to occur. The less we can do that, the better. Because it generally triggers, I want to control, I want to go into defense mode. So how do I explain, how do I explore a power with type of leadership, where I'm with people, you still know positionally who's in control there, who has the power, who has the position, but so it doesn't feel that way. And there's a whole range of stuff around trust, which is a real foundation piece to all of this. And at the basis of all of this, it talks about conversational intelligence, that worlds are created through words. Worlds are created through words. What we say, how we say them, when we say them, impacts on people around us. And are those positive, helpful messages, or are they unhelpful messages? As you can see, I liked the framework of this so much, I actually called my company Next Level Greatness, because it sort of resonated with me. How do we continue to improve? You know, in ways that are helpful and meaningful to people. And those of you who've done coaching with me might well remember, may well not, but might remember, what we want to do is nudge people into their learning zone or their growth zone. Our brain is hardwired to stay in a comfort zone. That's where we feel comfortable, and hopefully most of the time we're there. But where we start to progress, where we grow, is where we're nudged out of our comfort zone. The challenge is, what we don't want to do is push people into their anxiety zone. If I'm anxious, I shut down and get defensive, and that happens with the brain. It switches off and we go back into the rear brain, which I'll briefly explore in a minute, and then we go into defense. Do I feel safe around this? Google did a whole range of research around teams and found the single most important factor was psychological safety. So that impacts dramatically on how effective or not teams are. So that's the important bit that sits behind all this. How do I help people feel safe so we can work on things and move forward in a constructive, productive way as part of this? But fundamentally, it's conversations. The quality of the conversations directly impacts the quality of organisations. So how do we get a bit better at these conversations? And they talk about 9 out of 10 conversations miss their mark. It's a bit scary when you hear that, isn't it? Now, most of those are in small ways. Some of them are dramatic ways, we know that, but it's mostly the small ways where we think we remember exactly what was said. But in reality, we remember, linking back to Patria's talk this morning, a final quote about Maya Angelou. People forget what you did, said, but you never forget how you made them feel. So that's what we remember. And every 6 to 12 seconds we go inward. What do I feel about what, in this situation, Nick's saying? So we miss huge chunks of information. So it's about checking in. That's why often there's misunderstandings. I'm sure you've all been in staff meetings where you've heard exactly the same words and there is a range of different perspectives on what was said. Okay, and that's the reality. It filters through whatever our experiences are part of this. This is what sits behind it all. So I don't know how many brains you thought you had. You've got 6. All right, and again, this isn't across the board. Not everyone agrees with 6. Pretty well, I think everyone now, most people do that there's 4 brains, the ones in our head that we think about the most around this. The primitive brain, when our amygdala is fired, that's when we go into defence mode. I don't feel safe, I feel uncertain, that's when I go into defence mode. And you'll all have heard of, I'm sure, fight, flight, freeze. The 4th one that I came across that makes a lot of sense in terms of how we can operate at times is appease. So I want to take the conflict out of a situation. We just say yes, even when we don't believe it, or don't agree with it. We don't like conflict, so we're feeling a bit unsafe, so I'll just say yes, that's a good idea, even when I don't think it's a good idea. The most productive teams is conflict. Yeah, often our empathy, which is a strength in special ed and teaching, but particularly in special ed, gets overplayed. I'm so empathetic, I don't want this person to feel bad, so I'll just say yes, even when I don't always believe those things. So the most productive teams, there is a key point around conflict, where we have conflict, but it's not personal. It's about the topic, not about you as a person. And unpacking, how do we do that so we don't take it personally? When people challenge what we're saying and what we're thinking around things. The limbic bit, and this is very much Nick's version 101, and some of you may well know a lot more than I do, and I'm very happy for you to share with your colleagues what that is. But limbic brain is often where the emotions, so strong emotions are stored there, and links to memories triggered by emotions. The neocortex is where memories, short-term and long-term memories are stored. And the bit we're trying to trigger as much as possible in any conversation is the prefrontal cortex, the executive brain, the thinking brain. All the other bits just happen. You can't switch them off or on, they happen. A good friend and colleague of mine in the UK talks about mind brain and body brain. Body brain are automatic responses. We can't stop the amygdala firing. What we can do, if we know it's like to be fired in certain situations, plan. What am I going to do when this happens? So that's where we can put that proactive layer on top of automatic responses. So we're not making things worse, hopefully. And we've got a planned approach when we know these things are going to happen for us. So those 4 are pretty universally accepted. The other 2, less so. All right. So heart brain. So there's an organisation called Heart Math. I'm struggle to say that, but it's American, Heart Math, in the US, that talks a lot about the energy fields we give off as human beings. When we get within a certain distance, which I think is something like 12 feet, in America they're still talking feet and inches, when we get within 12 feet, we have a sense of the energy this person's giving out, positive or negative. And is that the ripple effect? Are we having positive impact on people around us or negative impact? And if I'm in a bad space, how do I get myself into a better space? What can I do to help shift into that? And that's been around for a while. Again, not everyone would agree with that, but there's as many signals that go from your heart to your brain as your brain to your heart. So you can argue which is controlling which, but there's a strong correlation and connection. The most recent one is the gut brain. All right, again, not universally accepted, but increasing evidence and increasing research about the impact of our gut and the health of our gut and how we operate. Those who are working with kids with ASD, that's been around quite a while, and that's not just kids with ASD, that's all of us. That impacts around gut health. And again, it makes sense of phrases that most of us have used, gut feelings, butterflies in the stomach, those sorts of things, where things are triggered. It's sensing. It's not a thinking brain, it's a sensing. But again, it's made up of similar structures as to our thinking brain is, our the brain in our head as well. Again, sends signals that trigger some of these automatic responses. So these things are happening all the time, and that's partly what conversation intelligence goes into, what sits behind that. If I had to describe what conversation intelligence is, this is often my frame of reference for people. So knowing that 9 out of 10 conversations potentially miss the mark, how do we close the gap? So less miss their mark and less miss their mark by a significant way. So very few people in my experience have a bad intention. When they're going into a conversation, whatever conversation that is, we don't want to have a negative impact on that person. We want to have a good impact, hopefully. Our intention is good, but how often either conversations we've had a negative impact on the person, we think what happened there, or people have had that impact on us. And that's because it goes through our own filter, our own bubble of our own experiences, background, knowledge. And we're all different. So again, good connections, but Petrea again talked about, didn't she, around those assumptions, and generally they are wrong. What we think people think is generally going to be wrong. So how do we check in with each other and check in to help get those spaces, just to make sure we narrow the gap. We're never going to totally close it because we're human beings and we're complex. But how do we close the gap? And again, tools and frameworks to help us close the gap. This is from a useless bit of trivia, so apologies if you've heard this before, but from a music festival called Burning Man in the States. And why I'm showing it, not just because it's a really nice picture, but also that inwardly we have our strongest innate desire within humans is to connect. Okay, our strongest desire, stronger than safety, and that plays out particularly with teenage boys, doesn't it, and girls to a degree, where they'll want to do something to fit in even when they know it's unsafe. And again, you might know, I always think about, some kids with ASD and other kids with ID might not display some of these, but most of us have that's the strongest desire, to how do I fit in? So even when we have polar opposite views, inwardly we're trying to work out how do we connect? How do we connect with each other? That's part of, the significant part for most of us as human beings is how do we connect as part of this. So I haven't got time, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm going to give you something to do now, because it's good rather than just sitting listening to me, particularly in the afternoon as part of this. But these are seen as the conversational essentials. And you will already do all of these on occasions. It's about being a bit more deliberate and how might I do these a bit better? What can I do to help me connect a bit more concretely with the person I'm having conversations with? One of the things I throw out a challenge now, and it's as much to myself as anyone else, because some of you will be very good at this, is that whole construct of small talk. And again, by calling it small talk, it almost says it's not important. But for me, that's how we connect as humans. If we've got the relationship, any conversation is more likely to go better. So actually finding time to connect at the human-to-human level is important. Not how much time and all those other challenges is part of it, but it's really important we do those bits. So at your table, the challenge is you've got 3 minutes, you've got to come up with 5 things you've got in common. All right, so at a table group, Andrew's all right because he's only got himself to agree with. You can jump in with these two here. All right, 5 things you've got in common.
Well, you want happy day or we're both in special ed, basically. You got children? Oh, I've got 3 children. I got 2 boys and a boy, and I'm looking for my 2 wings. It's November. That's scary.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, so one's having a baby, one's building a house, and one's trying to get a permanent job, but he's got a casual job at the moment, so
I've got a 21 who's been pregnant. And my middle daughter's 18. Just in school last year, but it's he was our surprise package when I came back.
my girlfriend's got a surprise package. My oldest is turning 28 this year. The little one who's pregnant is 24. And the next one is 23. Very close. That's a bit of a surprise too. So real close surprise. So
That was 10 years later. So how many did we have to get?
yeah, 3 of them. Yeah, 3.
Okay, folks, we'll come back together.
Business pressures.
So,
They do wonders for you.
depending whether you did that activity or not, obviously I'm not going around checking, I don't need to as part of that. But you were displaying 3 of the conversation essentials. Partly by doing things like that, one of the things you were doing was asking questions for which you don't have the answer. Alright, so we're checking out what is it about each other. So some of it you might have known, depends how well you know the person or people at your table. So one of the advantages of that is we're open. We're open and we're curious about what this other person might bring. I'm not saying that's an example of asking questions of which you don't have the answers. All right. Again, just a bit of internal reflection. What you think about on a daily basis, back at work, how many times are you asking questions where you don't have the answer? Not saying you have to be. Not aim isn't to get 100% that. Absolutely, need to check for understanding. We need to check that people have learnt and understand or know what's going to happen as part of it. But generally, displaying that behaviour is a really helpful one. All right. So good to think about. How much am I doing this? Can I do it a bit more? And that will depend on your role. There's not an aim to get to a set figure. It comes back to context, the person you're having the conversation with. It helps us connect when we're open to that and we're not trying to get the right answer out of people. Occasionally that's what's needed, but again, when people know we're testing them, we've got to be really mindful because then we feel judged as part of this. So it helps us stay out of judgment as part of that. You're also, presuming you were listening, you're listening to connect. All right? You're now, I'm not saying you're now BFFs, but you're slightly stronger connected to the people you're having that conversation with. That desire to connect, we've now got things in common. Okay, I didn't know that, etc. So it connects us slightly stronger. Okay, and all those little conversations that can take place around the workplace help build relationships, help build emotional capital. As long as we're doing them in an authentic way, again, that's a crucial bit, isn't it? Not that I've got a checklist. Quick, I need to, listen to connect to this person because I haven't done it today. We start to read through those things generally, but authentic display of these things. And what it does is prime for trust. It connects us at a trust level. Trust, and I don't think it'll come up, so I'll say it. Pretty sure it doesn't. Trust, again, they've got nice acronyms which resonate for me. I have a chance of remembering them when there's acronyms. So they talk about trust standing for the following things. T being transparent, transparency. So the more transparent we are about information, ourselves, knowledge, the more we trust each other. It still happens. I was with a school very recently, and they were saying this, they're going through a lot of change, as often we are in schools these days, but often that people didn't know. And a thing I was reading recently say, if we don't know, then people make it up. The nature of human things. If there isn't communication, we make up the communication, the gossip and the hearsay and all those other things that play out. So the more transparent you can be, the better. The R is relationship. Am I spending time to get to know this person? U is understanding. How do I check in understanding? I just pause for a second there. So understanding here is linked to the double clicking. So what we mean by double clicking, if you double click on a computer, on a file or a folder, it goes deeper. Checking for understanding. And in CIQ, they reframe understanding as trying to stand under a shared view of this topic or this thing, whatever it is. So the example I often use, 2 examples. One is engaged. So I'm presuming, hoping no one here would argue that we don't want, we do want students to be more engaged. But engagement for some people is really quiet, kids with their heads down working on things. For another teacher, it's lots of noise, lots of interaction. And again, we've got to get to a shared understanding of what do we mean by this. So again, we make up our own interpretations based on our background and understanding. So that's what double clicking can do around that. S is for shared success. So what we generally avoid always and never, but generally is a goal that we want. And the example I use to hopefully make sense to me and hopefully help make sense for you folks out there is about the difficult parent. All right? Virtually every school's got some parents who feel difficult. Feel like they've got unrealistic expectations. Yet shared successes, I'm sure, hope they want the best for their son or daughter, and so do we. different views of how we're going to get there and different things to take into consideration, but shared success and reminding people what we want. So when there's disagreement about how we're going to teach reading or how we're going to do whatever, we all want the best for our organisation. We want our teaching to be as effective as possible. How we get there is where the discussion, an important discussion, needs to take place. And the final tip, linking back to Patria, test assumptions. Right, because they're virtually always wrong. What we think one person thinks is nearly always wrong. So check out, this is my understanding of what you just said, is that accurate? Yeah, again, that's double clicking, we're checking out. So a bit of a thing I've started to do, I've done it for a while now, is if I'm in a conversation which I'm not uncomfortable, luckily enough I'm not really in that situation now, but I think there's a chance we can be misunderstanding each other or taking out information, different parts of the information. I'll follow it up with an email or put it in writing. So if it's not in writing initially, face to face, then just checking, this is my recollection of what we agreed. Is this the same as yours? There's a chance for people to say, no, actually I thought we did this. All right, so that chance to check in with each other as part of that. Being open to influence. So how open are we? Again, helps people connect, helps people have a chance. Being open to influence, sometimes absolutely we advocate. We have strong views about X, strong views about Y. Absolutely, that is appropriate. But sometimes good to display, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we should do in this situation. Again, sometimes as leaders, either we think or people who we work with think we should have the answer. And sometimes that is part of our role, but often it isn't. I think this might be a useful way to go, but I'm not sure. What do others think? And that links back to co-creating, where we bring ideas and share other people's ideas, and better things emerge out of it that we haven't thought about and they haven't thought about. So in CIQ they talk about co-creation as opposed to collaboration. Apparently, and don't feel bad if you've got collaborative working as part of your things, because I don't think most people use it in this sense, but collaboration, the origin of collaboration came from conspiring with the enemy. Right, most people, well, nearly all of us don't use it in that way, and that's not what we're thinking about, so don't feel bad if collaboration is in there with how you're using it. But we're generally trying to persuade someone to our point of view, or they're trying to persuade us. As co-creation, we throw ideas in together, and new things and better things, transformational things can emerge as part of that. Final one, just draw attention to conversational agility. Again, those who've done more in coaching will know that's part of what we're doing in coaching. Drawing attention to strengths, skills and qualities a person has. Drawing attention to the positives when there's lots of negatives as well. So all at times you will have redirected, reframed, refocused without knowing you're doing it. The more deliberate we can get around that into that space, the helpful. Because as human beings, we're more hardwired bad than we are to good. So this is why we can help people notice some of the good things and helpful things coming out of it. This is called the conversational dashboard. And again, I haven't got time to go into huge detail, but just to share what can be a helpful, useful tool and framework. So CIQ isn't a set curriculum that is taught, a whole range of frameworks and tools that people draw on as is useful, as is helpful to them in their setting, in their organisation. Bits to pick out from this. One is trust isn't just about you, human to human. This could be about the topic of conversation. All right, I'm really not sure about implementing this. So it could be low trust. Now, one of the things I like about this, it validates all positions. All right, so they all have a purpose. Not if we get stuck in skeptic and if we get stuck in resistor, but they all have a purpose and are useful. They're deliberately spelt, resistor is OR, not just because it's American. Electrical circuits, we have resistors in electrical circuits so we don't overload the system. Yeah, at times we need people to say, oh, I really don't think that's a good idea, because we could be too much too quick. You folks will know that very well. The speed of change is an important one, isn't it? How do we manage the speed of change so we're not burnt out by part of that? Now, this isn't about labelling people, and I always have a thought in my head. I can picture one or two people I've worked with over the years who the danger is this becomes who they are. They're always the resistor. That's not a healthy thing, not a helpful thing if we're always in resistor mode. All right, so, and I'll explain how you can use something like this to help shift people. The other one, just to draw attention to, experimental. Again, deliberately OR. Who's going to be the mentor of experiments? Who's going to give things a go? Linking to the agile things again. You know, evidence-based practice. That's certainly not going to argue against evidence-based practice. But I throw out there the idea of practice-based evidence. Someone's got to try these things to get the evidence. So it's managing that so not everyone's trying everything all at once, going off in different directions. But someone's got to try these things. Even when they're evidence-based practice, I have a view, doesn't mean they'll work in your setting. Just because they worked at the special school down the road, there's no guarantee they'll work in your school. So how do we give this a go and test it out to think of what modifications might we need to make in order to get this work as effectively as possible? So this can be used in a range of ways. It could be used to think about, okay, what position have I taken up in different conversations I've been involved in? It can be useful when there's a shared understanding in a team to say, when it's around a topic, a theme, all right, we're thinking of introducing the use of videos to in classrooms so we can reflect on our practice, just to throw out there, the one that's potentially a bit controversial. Where are we each sitting on this? Where do we sit? All right, so if you're in resistor or skeptic mode, the one could be, okay, given you're there, what do you need to see here? What needs to happen that might encourage you around to the right-hand side of it? Being stuck in resistor and skeptic is not great. Even if you're not getting negative chemicals released, people around you probably are. I'm feeling a bit uncertain now because someone's challenging it again. You know, our amygdala is then fired, so we don't feel great, we don't feel safe. So it can be a way just to explore people to help them move forward.